It's time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life here in France with Flo Villeneuve.
Hey, Jeannie.
Hi, Flo. Today we're going to talk about something France has been very proud of for a long time, a French exception, if you like, and that is the strong fertility rate in this country. For years, France has been the baby-making champion of Europe. But the country's been experiencing a bit of a baby blues, you might say, in recent years. The number of births has been dropping, particularly now during the time of the pandemic.
Which is surprising because, during the first lockdown, a lot of people were saying there could perhaps be a baby boom afterwards because people were stuck at home, they suddenly had a lot of time on their hands, not much else to do. So that's what people are expecting. But if you look at the stats, it's a different story. Let's take a look. 9 months after the first lockdown, France actually saw a historic drop in the number of births. People are actually calling it a baby bust, not a baby boom. According to France's National Statistic Bureau, l'INSEE, you can see here in January 2021, there was a 13% drop in the number of births compared to January 2020. It turns out it's actually hard to be optimistic during a global pandemic.
Des mères ont pu aussi avoir peur de transmettre le virus à leurs enfants. Cette crise sanitaire, elle s'accompagne aussi d'une crise sociale et économique avec beaucoup d'incertitudes sur l'avenir. Ce sont des facteurs dont on peut comprendre qu'ils font que les couples hésitent à mettre un enfant au monde en cette période.
Now, while a lot of French people might have postponed their baby-making plans, those who ended up going through with it say that actually being locked down at home, working from home, those were actually ideal conditions.
On a pu s'isoler, partir de Paris, et donc on était dans un contexte assez agréable, donc c'était très bien, et ça a participé au projet. Comme on était confinés, ça a aidé.
Heureusement, il y a eu le télétravail, je pense que ça m'a beaucoup aidé. Et à vivre aussi une grossesse beaucoup plus sereine, je pense aussi.
Now, the baby-making numbers might be down, but the confinement did have some positive effects, though, like a drop in the number of premature babies.
And this is a trend that's actually been observed here in France, but elsewhere in the world as well. It's really interesting, and it actually came as a surprise to a lot of doctors. Why are there so few preemies? Why are there fewer preemies being born? Well, doctors believe it actually could be due to a reduced stress level for mothers in the final part of their pregnancy, cleaner air, and even better hygiene. Take a listen.
Des dames qui ont été mises au repos chez elles, qui ont certainement eu moins de stress lié au travail, qui ont pu peut-être faire un petit peu plus de télétravail, moins de déplacements professionnels. Tout ça, ça a certainement contribué à ce que le dernier trimestre de la grossesse soit vécu plus sereinement. Et du coup, les enfants sont nés plus à terme. On a eu beaucoup moins de prématurés.
So some good news there for preemie babies, but there still is this big drop in fertility in France, but it's actually part of a trend that we've seen over the past couple of years.
Absolutely, and demographers say it's due to several reasons, the primary one being that the number of women and age of having children is dropping, and those women are having fewer babies. Take a look at the figures here. In 2020, 740,000 babies were born in France. That is the lowest number since the end of the Second World War, and you can see it's a real drop compared to a peak. This was in 2010 when nearly 833,000 babies were born. So that being said, the baby-making rate in France is still relatively high compared to other countries, particularly in Europe. Let's take a look at the figures. If you compare the figures from 2018, for instance, you can see that in France there were 1.88 babies per woman. Germany, 1.57. Italy, super low, 1.29. The European average, 1.56. So these are the European figures. Keep in mind that the replacement fertility rate, when the population renews itself, that is 2.1 children per woman. So you can see all these countries are below it, but France still is the champion of Europe.
So France does still have this traditionally strong fertility rate. And why is that? It's not because French people have particular baby-making powers or anything like that. It's because the country really has a strong welfare program that encourages people to keep having kids.
Absolutely. It's a generous system that was put in place in the 1930s. To boost the birth rate, the state essentially set up a family allowance system backed by tax incentives. And it's our expression du jour. It's known as les allocations familiales, and you start receiving them on the birth of your second child. Now, up until recently, this was a universal system of cash handouts. But in 2015, facing a major budget deficit, the socialist government decided to make the system income dependent. So high-income families receive a little bit less. Let's take a look at one case. If you are a family earning less than about 70,000 euros a year, for 2 children, you get 131.95 euros per month. It's a monthly stipend, and actually it makes a big difference when it comes to people's budgets.
Keeps you in diapers, that's for sure. All right, now, parental leave. Let's talk a bit about that. Some might say that it's actually not that high in France compared to other countries.
That's right, compared to all the Nordic countries, which have these amazing systems. Let's take a look at the system in France. Maternity leave is 16 weeks paid full salary. Paternity leave just increased recently. It's 28 days. What makes a real difference, though, is that the state makes it easier for women to go back to work. And this is what studies have shown is the easier you make it for women to go back into the workforce, well, the more babies they have, in fact. That being said, this reasoning has really been thrown up into the air due to the COVID pandemic. Everything is up in the air right now. There's so much uncertainty about the future. Will the French recover from this baby blues? Will they go back to procreating? Hopefully once the pandemic is a distant memory. And we'll have to come up for a generation name for these new babies. We were talking about the quarantines, but maybe it'll actually be the post-quarantines.
The COVID kids. Flo, thank you so much for that look at fertility here in France. So thanks to you for watching. If you have any of your questions about things here in France, you can always tweet Flo at Flo Vilmanot. That wraps it up for me this hour. Thanks so much for watching. Live from Paris continues after this.